Hi, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this evening. It is my pleasure, my great pleasure, to introduce our speaker this evening, Anne Ellet. Anne is a certified nurse practitioner and a number of other amazing degrees that we would be here all night if I spent time listing them all, but she has some very extensive experience with all aspects of dementia care, aging, and she's also the founder of Memory Care Support. She established the company to provide access to quality resources, educational products and services, and to just improve the health and quality of life for the aging, as well as those charged with their care. She is a strong advocate for healthy aging, memory care, and also enjoys good wine. So Anne, welcome.
Thank you, Andrea. Pleased to be here. And thanks for adding about the red wine.
My pleasure. I'm going to go ahead and bring up your presentation and we'll be all set to go.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I've been looking forward to this. So welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about aging well and specifically about how we can help keep our brains healthy as we age. It's a big concern. Lots of information now about what we can do in our own lifestyle to help keep our brain healthy. So today I'm going to be talking about 3 references. You see the photo there of the first one, the blue zones. So I'll be talking about 3 references. They talk about scientific studies that show that our lifestyle can have huge benefit, huge effects on how our brain ages. So my guess is that many of you tonight with us have heard of the Blue Zones. It's really a quite remarkable book with some great information in it. Dan Buettner went out with his team and studied areas around the world where people seemed to age very well. They lived a long time, they lived a good quality of life, they stayed healthy right up till the end, they were active, they were cognitively intact, their brains were healthy. And so he identified 5 areas around the world where there was some very unique things happening. So here you see the map with the 5 original areas that he studied, and they're spread all over the world. You have Okinawa, Japan, one of the islands, the Japanese islands. You have Ikari, one of the islands in Greece, Sardinia, Italy, Nicoya, Costa Rica, and there's only 1 blue zone in the United States, and it's in a small town in Southern California, which is real interesting. So he found in these 5 areas that there were a lot of older people who were still having great quality of life. They were still healthy. They were still involved. And he put together what he considered some of the main similarities between these 5 places. You can call them secrets to longevity. So you see here 4 of his findings from the blue zones. And one is that the people's diet had a lot of plant-based foods. Don't panic, doesn't mean you have to be a vegetarian. Many of them had small amounts of animal protein, particularly fish and seafood, but they also did eat beef, lamb, chicken. So you don't have to be a vegetarian to be healthy and protect your brain, but the diet had a lot of plant-based and fruits in their diet. There's something called the 80% rule, and I wish that I could say I adhered to this on a more regular basis. The 80% rule is you stop eating when you're 80% full. And I know a couple times this week I've gotten up from the dinner table and I've gone, oh, feels good to stand up. I'm so full. So I didn't follow the 80% rule. I ate until I couldn't put another bite in my mouth. So they found that the people in these 5 locations tended not to be obese because they didn't overeat. They stopped eating as they began to feel full. Alcohol in moderation. I'm sure many of you have heard that red wine in particular has some benefits for your brain. And 4 out of the 5 blue zones do drink alcohol in moderation. So it wasn't that you can't have your wine or your cocktail if that's important to your lifestyle. It's the moderation part that's important. And the other thing that he found that was consistent throughout these 5 areas was exercise was built into daily life. These people walked down the street to visit their friends. They did much of their own housework or house cleaning. They still did repairs. They walked to the grocery store, maybe just to get a couple items each day. So they were not dependent on motorized vehicles. They were out and about during the day. And the next slide, I think, has some of his other tips that he found are similarities throughout these 5 zones. People did tend to get adequate sleep, and that could include short naps. Many of the cultures in these 5 locations, older adults would take a nap, often in the afternoon after lunch, but it wasn't, they didn't go down for a couple hours. Their naps were 30, 40 minutes. They were not very long. And it didn't interfere with their nighttime sleep. And I think that's something that we really struggle with here, is that so many friends that I talk to say that they're having trouble sleeping through the night. Many of those 5 areas in the blue zones were considered religious or spiritual. That was a big part of their culture. They had belonged to churches, they had done different types of worship services, and they considered it part of their daily normal culture. So there are studies out that show that belonging to a church or having a spiritual practice can lengthen your life. Having a life purpose. And I think this is something else that in the United States we can look at, because older adults are often put aside into perhaps age-related communities, or if they're not in good health, they might go into some kind of a senior community, which can add a lot of life and enjoyment to their life. But what is their purpose? Meaning, what do you look forward to when you wake up in the morning? Do you have things that you want to do that are important to you? Do you have people that you're looking forward to connecting to? And I see many older people in our culture, they're kind of put aside. So as we age, this is something that we want to continue to look for and have in our lives as we age. Also, multi-generation live together or near each other. They found that grandparents that help take care of their grandchildren live longer. That gives them certainly a purpose, a life purpose. It's a reason to get up in the morning, but they had that great support system of multi-generations around them. And that healthy social network. And by that, I mean, who do you hang out with? If the people you tend to hang out with are maybe couch potatoes, and you're spending time watching TV together and eating snacks and having a few beers, or maybe more than a few beers, if that's your social network, you're more likely to adopt those habits. Versus if your social network sees themselves as healthy and active, and you're meeting them as part of a hiking group, or you're playing pickleball together, something like that. So more healthy habits. So something to think about. We do tend to adopt the habits of those around us. And so who do you surround yourself with? What kind of habits do they have? All right, so the second reference I want to share with all of you, if you're not already familiar with it, is called the Mind Diet. And this is a hybrid, a combination of two diets that we already know are healthy. The Mediterranean style diet, been a lot of press about that. Many of you have probably read about it. It's olive oil, little red wine, a lot of plant diet, a lot of seafood, things like that that we tend to think of are in the Mediterranean diet. And then the Heart Healthy DASH diet, which was created to help control blood pressure and things like that. So they combine those two diets together, and the Mind Diet focuses just on those foods that are particularly healthy for the brain. So the next slide shows about a study done at Rush University Medical Center. And this is quite remarkable if you look at the statistics on the lower part of this slide. So those who followed the Mind Diet to a moderate amount, to a moderate extent, had a 35% decrease in their risk to developing Alzheimer's disease. And if they followed it rigorously, they had a 53% decrease in developing Alzheimer's. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty wonderful to me. Those are fantastic statistics, and there is no medication, no pill we can take that's going to have that kind of benefit for us. So whether you follow it rigorously or moderately or just begin to make some little changes, you're going to see some benefit from it. So this is what most of us are consuming in the United States. And if you look at that big yellow area on that slide, that's 63%, that's processed foods. So what does that mean, processed foods? Well, it's those 2 or 3 aisles, it seems like it's getting to be more and more in the grocery store these days, of the chips, the snacks, the soft drinks, foods that are already prepared that might have a lot of the hydrogenated oils in them, that are high in salt. The things that we all love to eat, frankly. I mean, my go-to when I can is a bag of potato chips. I mean, who doesn't love that? So this is how the American diet typically is portioned off, where 63% of our calories are processed foods. Animal food, protein from animal foods is 25% of our calories. And if you look at those little green area on the slide, it's not very much, it's only 12%. Only 12% of our calories come from plant-based foods, versus what we were talking about with the Mediterranean or the DASH or the Mind Diet, which is very heavy in plant-based foods. So something to think about. If you look at your plate, I think there's a picture coming up of maybe what you could have this as a visual as you're preparing your meals, and is half of your plate from plants? Is it you got your broccoli, your potatoes, your salad on there, maybe some fruit? So if half of your plate is from vegetables and fruits, and then the other half is divided between protein foods, and it could be meat if that's your preference, but it could be nuts or beans or eggs, and then whole grain foods is the other 25%. So that's kind of a visual of when you set your plate down at night. How much do I have for processed foods, and how much of it is fresh foods? And then the third reference that I think is really worth reading, if you're not familiar with it, is a relatively new book that's come out by Dr. Sanjay Gupta called Keeping Your Brain Sharp. And he's getting older himself, and he says in the book he has a real interest, and he really did some research on what are the best practices to help keep our brain sharp. Should we be doing crossword puzzles or word games, or what exactly should we be doing? So he has several tips in his book, and if you're not familiar with him, he writes in a very easy way to read. It's a very enjoyable book to read, and a lot of good information and a lot of good tips on things that we can be doing. So he has several things that he lists, and it's interesting to me the way he puts it. He says, think of inactivity as a disease. It's a disease that we want to control and get rid of if we can. And of course, this isn't just relevant to us as we age, because there's a lot of studies coming out now that even younger people and even fairly young children are pretty inactive. A lot more time spent on phones and computers instead of out, being physically active. So this is something that I think is going to potentially affect several generations until we can begin to turn this around. So think of inactivity as disease. It's a very interesting way for him to put that. He says, eat real foods, and that goes back to that slide you saw where 63% of our calories come from processed foods. They sure taste good. I sure love them myself, but he doesn't call them the real foods. The real foods are, you're saying, this is a carrot, and I can identify it. When you eat I don't know, Cheetos, one of my favorite processed foods. I'm not quite sure what vegetable those come from. So not real foods, probably. Hydrate. We've all been told to have 6 to 8 glasses of fluid every day. Well, we do get a lot of water and fluid from, if you're eating fruits and vegetables, they are made up of a lot of fluid, water. So you might not need 6 to 8 glasses if you are eating a lot of fruits and vegetables. But he says it's important. It's important for our kidneys. It's important for our lungs, heart, our brain, our circulation to hydrate well. Time for friends. Again, talking about the value of spending time with friends, being out and about, not isolating. This last year has been so very tough for all of us. I think, I have grandchildren that it's been tough for. I work with older adults. It's been tough for them. We all miss that. And so hopefully we're able to get back into that now. So important to our well-being. Dr. Sanjay Gupta values time spent meditating because it's a way to manage and deal with our stress. And I think during COVID, a lot more information was sent out about how to meditate and the value of meditating. There are so many apps now on our phones that you can put them in for 10 minutes and it will put you through a guided meditation, or you may have your own preferred way. I like to take walks in the morning, and I consider that a meditation. I get some of the best thinking done while I'm on my walk, and my brain is very relaxed when I come back. So there are many different things that can be considered meditation, but he really talks about the value of that. And again, just like we saw from the blue zones, he talks about having purpose. Maintain your reason for being. Don't let that slip away from you as you get older. And I had just real quick, I'm just going to share a real quick story of an older woman that I went to visit in her home. And I was the nurse practitioner going to visit her. And when I read her report, I found out that she was quite ill and frail. And I thought, oh, she's probably going to be very isolated. So when I went to her home, a wonderful, friendly person with a big smile greeted me, a young woman who was helping her in her home. But you could tell this person was very social, very talkative. And then I went in and met the older woman, and I could tell they had a wonderful relationship. They were very friendly and they joked together. And then this older woman, who I thought probably wouldn't be able to get out of the house much and would be isolated, I found out that she had donated her garage to one of the local shelters, and they used it to store clothing for people who needed extra clothing and blankets. And so she had a constant stream of people coming in to her house, and she had purpose and always had different people socially that she could relate to. So I thought it was a great example of how she maintained her purpose and her reason for being. So we want to protect our brain. We want to protect our cognition. We want to be able to stay focused. Our brain is so complicated. We think what we want to protect is the ability to remember, to have memories, but actually our brain is so complicated, does so many things. On the next slide, you can see that it just some of the actions that our brain is doing for us. It allows us to have attention and stay focused. We can stay focused if there's danger coming. We can stay focused if there's an opportunity for us. It allows us to focus and analyze. We use language, writing, and speaking. Those are very complicated. Our brain does that for us. We're constantly making decisions, little tiny decisions. Is it time to start dinner? Do I want this? Do I want that? Should I call this person now? Should I invest in this? Should I make this big decision? Should I change jobs? We're always making decisions. It allows us to prioritize everyday tasks. These are actually very complicated things when you think about how we're deciding every day what we do. We can learn new things. It's so much fun to continue to learn new things. We can learn from our mistakes. I can remember my mistake when I went downtown at 5 o'clock and there was a traffic jam. I remember from that mistake, and now I'm going to go down and not do my errands at 5 o'clock. I'm going to do them at 1 p.m. when there's much less traffic. So we can learn. We're always making those judgments. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Is it a safe thing or is it a dangerous thing? Another thing that our brains do is they help us find our way. Wayfinding. I know we have apps now that help us, but nevertheless, we're always using that to navigate when we go someplace. Even if you have an app, your brain is still assisting you. So very important. But memory, the ability to keep our memories, that is so important. There was a couple of years ago, I believe it came out in one of the magazines that the most feared disease nowadays is Alzheimer's disease. More than cancer, more than heart disease, we are scared of losing our memories, our ability to remember, because so much of that is what defines us. It is our identity in many ways, what is unique about us. So when we think of memories, and I work a lot as a nurse practitioner, I work a lot with people who might be living with Alzheimer's disease or some other type of dementia. And almost all of them still have memories. They might not be the lengthy, consistent memories that they had when they were younger, but many of them still do have memories. And one of the ones that seems to be embedded in people's brains and lasts there a long time is they'll smell something or they'll see something and they will start talking about something that their mother cooked or maybe that they cooked when they were younger for their own children. So So things as which seems somewhat simple, the memory of your mother's cooking, or how your child's laughter sounded, or maybe it's that vacation you took 10 years ago to Italy. You also remember some of the bad things that happened to you, that car accident. You remember that you shouldn't be ordering shellfish because you're allergic to it, or that you remember to pay your bills on the 15th of the month. So our memories are very complex. They're not all the same, and they are spread out. Our brain collaborates. Different parts of our brain collaborate for us to retain our memories. They're not just located in one area of our brain. So as we heard earlier, really the blue zones was a great example when they talk about these 5 diverse communities around the world and different cultures, really different lifestyles. But they found that a healthy lifestyle can control 70 to 80% of our longevity. So our genes, what we inherit, certainly affects our longevity, but the lifestyle has a greater impact on how long you live and whether your brain and your body is healthy. Excuse me. So all of those kinds of things that we've been mentioning, from your diet to your exercise to your sleep, all contribute. Well, I think a lot of us have received information over the last many years about keeping our hearts healthy. We don't want to have a heart attack, so that's why there was this big emphasis on people should stop smoking or not start smoking. This is why if you go to the doctor as an adult, they're probably going to measure your cholesterol because they know that's important for your heart. They're going to check your blood pressure every time you go to the doctor. These are important things for your heart. You want to try to avoid getting diabetes, or if you have it, you want to keep it in good control. Well, guess what? All of those things are good for your brain too. And it makes perfect sense. I mean, our body is not segmented into one organ and another organ with walls in between. Everything is connected. And so if it's good for our heart, it's going to be good for our brains also. So they found that people who have healthier hearts have healthier brains, and vice versa. They exercise. So if exercise is good for your heart, it's going to be good for your brain. If your cholesterol is under good control, that also benefits your brain. And there was a Swedish study done that looked at 30,000 women, and they found that if they had a healthy diet and they exercised and they didn't smoke and they drank only moderately and they avoided obesity, that they had a 25% lower risk of strokes than women who didn't have those 5 healthy habits. So there's just study after study, and strokes affect our brain. So those were really lifestyle things that we think of are for our heart, but they actually also benefited the brain, and there was less risk of stroke. All right, so now sleep. That's an important one, and we've all heard the phrase, we wish we could sleep like a baby. They seem to just relax, sleep deeply, and wake up refreshed. As we get older, sometimes there's aches and pains. Sometimes we're worried about things. But the benefit of sleep is they've found that it actually can help clear out some of the toxins, the materials that make those plaques that are laid down in the brain that can contribute to Alzheimer's and other dementias. So if you're not sleeping good, it's really worth taking time to think about it and say, Are there anything else that I can do that can help me get a good night's sleep? So some of the tips for sleeping good, and it's so easy to, I mean, I read my books on my iPad, so I'm reading in bed with my iPad. But they've found that the light that comes off of our electronic devices can change our brain's ability to go into that sleep mode. So it's recommended that 30 to 60 minutes before sleep, you turn off your electronic devices. Another reason that babies maybe sleep so good and maybe we don't sleep so good is that we have a lot on our mind. We have a lot of things that we did today, and we're thinking about the things we're going to do tomorrow. And you're thinking about how you're going to interact or what you have to do or where you have to go. And so one technique that can help is you go, I'm afraid that I'm not going to remember this tomorrow morning. Well, get up and write it down, or keep it by your bed, write it down, and then you can just let it go and say, I will address this in the morning. But you don't have to keep thinking about it. It can be a release if you write it down. Now, alcohol, a lot of people say, oh, a glass of wine helps me sleep, or I feel sleepy after I have a cocktail. And it's true, alcohol is initially a depressant. So it does slow you down. It does help you feel sleepy. But as it is metabolized in our bodies over the next 2 to 3 hours, it actually breaks down and acts like a stimulant and wakes you back up. So if you're having trouble sleeping, think about that and try that and say, am I having something to drink, alcoholic drink, in the evening, mid-evening, or close to when I go to bed, and then am I waking up later? It could very well be because it is being metabolized, it's leaving your body, but it stimulates you as it's broken down. So think about that. And then the other tip for sleep that we've heard again, and Dr. Gupta talks about it, is the value of meditating. And there are research studies that show that people who regularly meditate have less inflammation in their brain, and they're better able to focus. So that's pretty powerful too. So again, lots of apps that you can use, or I love good old YouTube, lots of things, examples of things that maybe you can find something that's comfortable and fits for you, that you could do just 5-10 minutes before you go to bed. It could help a lot. All right, well, exercise, so important. Our friends to the north, the Canadians, they did a study that found that the more physically active adults were, the higher they scored on tests of memory and problem solving. So they are exercising, they're improving their circulation, they're getting more blood to their heart, they're getting more blood pumped out. Well, guess what? They're also getting more blood pumped up to the brain. Exercise releases a lot of chemicals, and it can help you feel better in terms of your mood. You feel more cheerful, you feel like you've accomplished something, you feel more positive, and it also can improve your scores on memory and problem solving. So definitely something worthwhile there for exercise. And the hippocampus, which is a small area towards the back of the brain, where it is an important area for memory. It's not the only place that is responsible for memories, but it is an important part of having and making memories, tends to shrink as we age. And a study found that people who do regular exercise, they have less shrinking of the hippocampus of the brain. So I played pickleball this morning, so I feel pretty good about that. just one last study I want to talk about quickly is there's a study out of Italy that found that working your leg muscles, so walking or biking or playing tennis or something like that, found that it stimulated the brain to make new cells. So everything is connected. Everything is connected. Well, I want to leave you all with, it's kind of a fun page on the Blue Zone website, and it's called Blue Zone Project Results. And Dan Buettner and his team, they have these recommendations of things that can help gradually change people's lifestyles. And there are cities around the world, but certainly cities within the United States that said we want to be a blue zone. We want to be a blue zone city. And one of them that stepped forward and put together a plan is Fort Worth, Texas. Now, I have family in Texas. I've spent a lot of time in Texas. It's a wonderful state, but it's not, I'll tell you, it's not the healthiest state in terms of lifestyle. They love their barbecue and a few other things that probably aren't high up on a list of healthy foods. So I thought it was interesting that Fort Worth, that's known for their cattle drives and their meat, wanted to be a blue zone city. But you can see some short videos on the Blue Zone website about it. And they gradually implemented change on things that encouraged exercise. They had more education about diet. And after a few years, they could document that they had decreased obesity. They had increased exercise. The citizens of Fort Worth were more active. They had less cardiac fatalities and less hospitalizations. So I'm just going to say if Fort Worth can change, any of us can change. So I think it's about making small changes and having big impacts. So thank you for your time, and if there's questions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
Great, thanks, Anne. First of all, great information. It certainly made me think about my lifestyle and habits. I'm sure from the questions that came in, I think everybody's doing a little thinking. We have lots of questions. Yes. So lots of questions, so I'll go in and get started. I just want everyone to know that if we don't get to your question, because we are limited with time, we will be putting together an ebook right after the presentation. We'll be emailing it out to everybody. It'll have all the questions that came in during the registration and during the presentation itself. So let's go ahead and get started. So Doug wants to know, there's been so many studies that indicate the lifestyle choices that can positively affect our brain health. Is there one lifestyle change that is most important? And I'm hoping it's the drink one glass of wine a day.
That is a very important one. Very important one, yes. Well, I think all of the studies, and if you were to look back at those 3 books and many other studies that they talk about in the media, you're going to get a cumulative benefit the more changes you make. So if you want to choose just one and say, all right, I'm going to start exercising more, that's definitely going to have a benefit. Or if you said, I'm going to start cutting back on processed food, that's definitely going to have a benefit for you. But you get a cumulative benefit if you make changes in many areas. That being said, if I had to pick one, I would think that exercise is so amazing on the benefits it has. For your circulation, for your heart, for your brain, helps avoid things like diabetes, or helps control diabetes if you do have it, helps avoid obesity. So if there was one, I would say try and gradually be more active, but you're going to get a better benefit if you also include other things.
Great. So more pickleball.
More pickleball. More pickleball, less smoking.
Okay. Great. Well, Deb asks, if I do things like crossword puzzles, will that keep my brain sharp?
Again, there was a lot of, about 10 years ago, there started to be a lot of emphasis on, oh, we should all be doing crossword puzzles or Sudoku or things like that. And absolutely, it's going to help our brains. But they said what the studies found is that if you do a lot of crossword puzzles, you get better at crossword puzzles. It doesn't mean that you overall become healthier. So yes, any way we can challenge ourselves is going to be good, challenge our brains. They say two of the best things to challenge our brain is to either learn a new language, because it's very complex and it involves multiple areas in your brain. And the other one is take up ballroom dancing, because it involves thinking and coordinating your feet and hips, and it's a very complicated thing. So, and if you probably took up a new language while you were ballroom dancing, you probably would just be growing up.
And then have your glass of wine after.
And have your glass of wine after. Yeah. Sounds
Great.
like a plan to me.
Paul wants to know, I really like steak once in a while. Will that affect my brain health?
I would think having a steak once in a while sounds like a great plan. And we all have something. I'm not going to give up my bag of potato chips either. You know, I'm going to have that once in a while. So, but I think, again, it's putting it in perspective. What else is going on with your body? Are you in generally good health, or have you had 2 or 3 heart attacks? I might think about giving up that steak. But if generally you're in pretty good health, we all have to have our ice cream or our steak or something once in a while and enjoy it.
Great. A question from Courtney talked about socialization being important. She wants to know why the socialization is important for brain health.
Actually, that's an interesting one, and it's certainly been a lot of studies in this last year about the isolation that COVID has caused. And when people are isolated, they higher rates of depression, higher rates of obesity, other things went up also. But socialization is actually interesting because it's different than if I'm sitting at home watching and receiving information on my TV passively. But when you are out social in a conversation, you have to focus and pay attention. You have to adjust your responses to be appropriate to what the other person said. You have to be able to analyze and think. And the conversation might be moving a new direction, and now you're going to have to readjust again. So again, it's quite a complicated function when you think about it being in a social group. And they said that is very good for our brain also.
Great. Carrie would like to know, she noticed that the blue zones are all over the world, but there's only one in the US. And what's unique about the one that's in the US?
It is a unique place. It's in Loma Linda, California, which is not that far from where I am. It's inland in Southern California near San Bernardino. It's a small town of about 25,000 people. And a large portion of the population in that town are Seventh-day Adventists.
Oh.
So it's the only blue zone that they are vegetarians, and they do not drink alcohol or smoke. So right away, they have a leg up on some pretty healthy habits. But they also believe that exercise the body is God's temple, and exercise is healthy for it. So they make time during the week for exercise. They make time during the week to spend with their families. They make time during the week to go to church. So all of these things together, the women and men live there 5 to 10 years longer than the average in the United States. So they have a healthy lifestyle.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kelly would like to know, are there any medicines that she can take that will keep her brain healthy?
And the answer is at this time, no.
Ah.
That might be different than what you're seeing in magazines or TVs, because they are definitely trying to sell us supplements and things to keep our brains healthy. If you think of a medicine to keep your brain healthy, think of a medicine that's going to help control your cholesterol. Think of a medicine that's going to help control diabetes if you have it. Think of a medicine that's going to help manage your hypertension. These are medicines that will help those conditions, and that will also help your brain. But is there a supplement or a medication that any of us could take that's I mean, did you see that study on the MIND diet? 53% decreased risk of, there isn't anything that touches that. So no, there's not anything that we can take at this time that they know of that will protect our brains.
Well, if you invent it, let me know.
Yeah, I will.
So I think, Anne, we have time for one more question. What do I do if I'm actually concerned about memory loss now?
Yeah. Good question. There's a lot of fear about it. People often delay talking about it or delay going to their healthcare provider about it. And I really recommend that if you feel your ability to remember has changed, or your ability to process information has changed, I do encourage you to go and share that and ask for a good workup for this. Because while there are dozens of things that can cause dementia, certainly Alzheimer's is one, but there's Lewy body, frontotemporal, but there's also things that are reversible. There are other physical diseases and conditions that can cause us to not remember well or to not think clearly. And you would want to be sure you didn't miss any of those if they are reversible and treatable. So go and get a good workup. It's going to involve a very extensive physical examination. It's going to involve what is called neuropsychological testing, where you're going to be tested on your ability to think clearly and analyze and repeat and remember, and many different kinds of mind tests. It might involve a scan of your brain, a CT or an MRI of your brain, to be sure there's no tumor or any other unusual things going on there. And then often the good news is they've ruled out any of these bad things, but then what they are left with is they can help you say, is this look like it's developing into dementia, or are you just fatigued and tired because of the crazy year we've had, and let's see you again in 6 months and we think you might be feeling. So there's a lot of things that affect our ability to concentrate and remember.
Great.
But I encourage people not to put it off, not to think that, well, there's no point because there'd be nothing I could do about it anyway. You really do want to go and make sure you're not missing any other disease or physical condition. And then also finding out what, I think we all deal with news better, knowing what it is rather than worrying about it.
Yes. At least you can make a plan, right?
You can make a plan. So important.
Yep. Great. Well, unfortunately, we have to go, but this was such a great first step toward healthier living and a healthier lifestyle. Anne, I want to thank you so much for your time today. This was great. I'll be up all night thinking about how I have to sleep better.
No.
And I want to thank to all of you who attended. And again, if your question didn't get answered, don't worry. We'll be sending out the ebook and a recording of today's presentation in the next couple of days. Have a good rest of the day and a good evening, everyone. And thanks again.
Thank you, Andrea. Have a good evening.